Hi, Dr. Sue. I would like to begin by asking you what was your spiritual understanding before you came in contact with Sai Baba?
Well, I was raised a Christian, and I'm from the United States. And when I was about 17 years old, I was sitting in church one Easter Sunday. And of course, if you're a Christian, then for you, God takes the form of Jesus. And here I was, 17 years old, and sitting there on a very sacred holiday for the Christians. And I suddenly realized I was never going to find Jesus through the Christian church. This understanding just came to me. And so at that age, I left the church and I started a search for God. I wanted to find God. And that took me through maybe 5 years, 4 or 5 years of searching and searching and searching, and I just couldn't find God. And finally, one friend of mine offered me a book. He said, I think maybe this is what you might be looking for. And it was a book about Sufi beliefs, so the mystical tradition in Islam. And I'd never heard of that before, but I started reading the book and it just clicked for me. And I thought, this is what I was looking for, because it was a more universal kind of belief. You know, it wasn't so much a religion as it was the mystical tradition you could find in any religion.
Oh, okay.
And so that really was what I thought I was doing. I thought I was a Sufi. But of course, there was no group of Sufis near me. This was in the early 1970s in the south of the United States. The southern part of the United States, the southeast, is very conservative and very Christian. And so there were no Sufis there. And I knew from reading the books that I needed a teacher, right, which is also not a Christian concept particularly.
Oh.
But I knew I needed to find a Sufi teacher. So I started my hunt, and I was looking for a Sufi teacher. And I was reading books by a great teacher named Idris Shah, who wrote in that era, and he was in the UK. And so I tried to go to the UK, and it didn't work out, and I thought I would go someplace here or there. Wherever I tried to go, I couldn't find my Sufi teacher. So at that time, I happened to move to India for a couple years, and I was living in Delhi, and I just happened to find a place to live that was kitty corner to a Sufi center.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't look for it, but it just happened to be there. So I got to go there for any of the events that were for the public. And there were a number of Sufi teachers at that center, and none of them were my teacher either. So there I was still looking for my Sufi teacher. And in the spring of that year that I was living there, almost at the end of my stay, some Sufi friends of mine came by and they said, guess what? Sai Baba has come to Delhi. And I had heard of him before, just briefly, and I thought, well, that would be interesting to meet him. And they said, come on, there will be hundreds of thousands of people there. So maybe, but he wears an orange robe. You might catch a glimpse of him in the distance. And I said, no, I don't think I'll go. So there he was, staying right down the street from me. But I didn't go. I did have car darshan one day. He drove past us and gave the most beautiful darshan. But still, you know, I wasn't that interested because I was looking for my Sufi teacher. So still for 7 more years after that, I still was looking for my Sufi teacher. And Sai Baba would appear in my life in various ways. He would suddenly pop up. My parents called me, for example, and said, there's going to be a speaker on meditation this weekend. He's a follower of someone named Sai Baba. Have you ever heard of him? And I said, oh, yes. And, you know, he must be a very good guy because these wonderful people I've known have been his followers. So let's go. And we went, and that was a wonderful experience. And we all got interested in Sai Baba. But then I sort of drifted away. And that happened several times over 7 years. I finally came to Swami in 1983.
So your first visit to see Sai Baba, what was it?
What was that like?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to tell a little bit about what it was like just physically arriving at the ashram. When I went to see Baba, when I finally went to see him so many years later, I had two questions for him. And my first question was, does God exist? I didn't really believe in God at that point. And if God exists, then can it take a form and live here on earth? And so when we were about 20 minutes outside the ashram, where you come, there's a big gateway that you go through as you're driving to the ashram. That's the Satyasai Taluk. It's the Satyasai district. And just as we came there, I suddenly had this wish from the heart that Swami would be at the gate to greet me. And I thought, how could you have such a wish? You know, that's so selfish. Of course, he's very busy. And I didn't even know what I meant by gate, because of course it wasn't my wish, you know, it was just God willing and God giving. And 20 minutes later we got to the ashram and we came to the gateway. There's several of these gateways, and we came to the one between the university complex and the village. And we were my parents and I were in one car. There were two other cars with us of veteran devotees who knew more what they were doing and what they were looking for. And all three cars suddenly came to a sudden halt in the middle of the road. And I was looking around. I'd lived in India before, so I was looking for children or goats or something that had caused the cars to stop. And there was nothing. There were not even any people. There was nothing in the road. And puzzled, you know, we looked over at the other two cars, and those people were and so we looked where they were pointing, and there was a white Mercedes stopped in the middle of the road under the gateway with only Swami sitting all by himself in the back seat. So he turned around and he greeted us so lovingly, everybody in the cars, in the three cars. And it was a wonderful, wonderful welcome. But as I was looking, all I could actually see was this vast field of crackling white energy. It was brilliant and blinding, and behind it, just vaguely, I could see this orange color. So it was my welcome from Swami, but it was also the answer to my question right away before I even got there. I knew it was such an overwhelming, overpowering experience. I knew God exists and here it is. And I never again, I've been a devotee for 35 years, I never once doubted that Swami was, in fact, God. So as I went through my first darshans, Swami would come along and he would get near me, and all I could see was this huge field of crackling white energy. And it was like diamonds in the sun. You know, it was blinding. It was blindingly brilliant. And so I would look up at him, and I couldn't even look, really. It was so blinding. But just behind there, again, I could see this vague bit of orange, maybe a little bit of black from the hair. That I couldn't really see him. I could just see this white, what I thought was like a screen of power in front of him. And after some darshans, I started looking around, and I realized all the other devotees got to see Swami. And I wanted to see Swami too. And so I started praying to him, could you please lower that screen of power in front of you so that I can see your face? I want to see your face. And over about, 3 or 4 darshans maybe, slowly the screen went down, 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 and it was gone. And I could see Swami, and I was so happy. And it was years before I realized what I had lost, you know, what grace that had been to show me that, you know, what the Vedas call the ocean of milk. So it was a very high level of God that he was showing me.
Wow, that's amazing. Can you tell us how your life was changed forever after you started living in Prashanti?
Well, I had always wanted to live in Prashanti. When my first visit there was just for 6 weeks. But it was so wonderful an experience that I ended up staying for 7 months. And even when I left, I didn't want to leave. I had to leave because of a visa. But I didn't want to leave, and I always wanted to go back and live there for some time, however long I could manage. But I never did. You know, Swami keeps people very busy. So he sent me back to school, and he sent me to work, and so forth. And decades went by, and I never had the chance to go. Though finally, the chance came. And after Swami had always, when I would ask him, you know, oh, I want to come here, he'd, no, go back. You go work. Finally, when I had the chance, he said, what took you so long? So I got my chance. And I would say living there, it's very, very intense to live around Swami. I had 7 years of living there when Swami was still here. And so every day, intense interactions with Swami, intense experiences with other devotees, their challenges every day for, I think, everybody. But
it's day to day.
Day to day, yeah. Oh, every day. As opposed to, you know, when we live in our home countries, we're pretty comfortable. So we may have some problems here and there, but basically we're pretty comfortable and everything's easy, and we can get a little complacent about our spiritual growth. But living there and living around Swami, there's no chance to get complacent. He gives us challenges every day. So that was the beauty of it, and that was really what I wanted, was that kind of intense focus on God and not being distracted by all the things that we're distracted by in our home countries. You know, we have work and family responsibilities and whatever. We have so many things going on. And there I didn't really, of course, I was working, doing service work, and I was writing books, and I was helping other women edit their books and get them published. So I wasn't idle, but it wasn't the kind of distraction and pressure that we feel in our home countries. So I could really, really concentrate on sadhana and on Swami.
What is it about Sai Baba's teachings that appeal to you?
I would say the most amazing thing to me about Swami's teachings is that they're so egalitarian. He doesn't say, I'm God and you're down here. He says, you're God and I'm also God, but you've just forgotten. So remember it, remember. And he makes it seem so doable. You know, he made it seem very possible that we could remember that we were God. Even though starting as a person, that seems like a huge long way to go, and it is, he somehow made it very simple and accessible. So I found him to be very encouraging, he instills confidence, self-confidence in people, especially spiritual confidence.
So what is the greatest manifestation or miracle you have witnessed with Sai Baba?
I think the greatest miracle for me was always Swami himself. He was so loving and so patient and forbearing and forgiving, because, you know, every day he was walking among these huge crowds of people who were clamoring and for attention and grabbing at him and just wanting from him. And you could hear as he walked by, Swami, 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 Swami. Everyone was calling Swami. But he was just so serene and so loving and patient with everybody. So for me, that was always actually the biggest miracle. I watched him materializing things so many times, but for me, that somehow never struck me. Of course, it's also miraculous, but that never really struck me. It was the way he was.
Do you have any examples of any miracles you experienced with Swami?
Yes, sure. I think we all have lots and lots of examples of miracles. There are two that really I'd like to share. Yeah. One from my first year as a devotee and one from much, much later, almost, you know, the end of my time. The first one, three of us had taken a trip from Prashanti up to Delhi. Swami had called us in for an interview just before this, and he said, you three go to Delhi and get permanent resident visas and stay for 1 more year. So I was already at the limit of my time there, and so were the other 2 ladies with me. And he sent us up to Delhi to the home ministry. And we were 3 young American women in Delhi. And we went to the home ministry. We got all the way up to Delhi. We found the home ministry. We went to the home ministry. And they said, yes, yes, how can we help you? And we said, oh, we'd like to get resident permits. And they said, well, what kind of visas do you have? And we're on tourist visas. And within 5 minutes of going in there, they had said to us, absolutely not. We said, we came all the way to Delhi. No, there's no way you can turn a tourist visa into a resident permit. So we were out the door, and it was just what, the devotees like to call us Swami Leela. He had sent us all the way there for whatever his good reasons were, but they weren't about getting a resident permit and staying another year. So we were out on the sidewalk in the middle of Delhi, and it was getting to be dusk, and there were no autos to take us anywhere. And the autos were all, we needed to go in one direction. The autos that we saw were all going in the other direction. And we asked a few of them, hello, could you take us that way? No, we're going this way. And it had to do with the timing of the traffic in Delhi. People will only go whatever direction at whatever time of day. And the autos were not at all cooperative. And so we were standing there, and we didn't quite know what to do. And there was a dirt road across the main paved road from us, like a dirt road was coming at us. And on the corner of the main road and the dirt road, a large gang of men was forming. And they were looking over at us like, ho, maybe we can cause some mischief here. And it was getting to be, the feeling was that it was dangerous. Yeah. And just as I realized this is getting to be dangerous, I looked at that dirt road that was facing us, and this huge cloud of dust, sparkling dust, appeared in this road. And I thought, well, what happened? Was there a wind that created all this? And of course, there was no way there was no wind, but it couldn't have created this big cloud in the road. And out of this cloud drove an auto rickshaw with a little tiny Sikh driver. And it came up to us, facing already in the direction that we needed to go. And I said, well, I was very puzzled by this. I said, well, but we need to go this, here. Yes, get in. And, oh, okay, sure? Oh, sure, get in. And so we 3 of us got in the back of this auto, and the driver took off. And I started puzzling because Sikhs are not usually tiny. And I was like, this is a tiny Sikh. What is going on? And this driver turned around to me. I don't know why he picked me of the 3 of us. And he started asking me all kinds of personal questions. And he said, so, you're living in an ashram in the south with your teacher? And I was like, yes. And he said, you're studying Telugu, which was true, but he had no way to know that. I didn't have a book with me or anything. And I looked at him, I said, yes. And he kept on going with all these very personal questions that, of course, only Swami could have known. And my 2 friends on either side of me said, it's Swami. Wow. So we felt so wonderful that he had rescued us, and he materialized not only himself, but an entire auto rickshaw. And he took us straight to the house where we were trying to go, a long distance away. He drove straight there. And when we got nearby, I had been there many times before when I lived in Delhi. I said, I think we have to go left here. He said, no, we go right. We go right. Which was, of course, also a Swami teaching. So that was a beautiful kind of a protection story. And many years later, actually after my first visit to New Zealand, which was 7 years ago, I happened to be flying on Malaysian Airlines. And I had a lovely trip. And just as we were approaching Bangalore, the thought went through my mind, what an easy, lovely trip this has been. And you know how if you've flown in an airplane, you know the sounds of the plane coming down and coming for landing. And you may not pay much conscious attention to it, but you know, okay, the engines are coming down, our speed is coming down, and we must be getting close to the ground and so forth. And I was hearing that, not paying a lot of attention to it, but hearing it, and we were still going at least 200, 250 miles an hour. So obviously we were 15 or 20 minutes still to landing. And something caused me to look out the window. I wasn't sitting at a window seat, but I looked out the window on one side, and there was the ground. And I knew in that instant, we're going to crash, and nobody is going to survive this. We were going way too fast. And so there wasn't even time to say Sai Ram. So in my head, what happened is I just shouted in my mind, Sai Ram! And just like that, like someone had changed the slide, we were going a proper speed and we landed like 2 moments later, safely. Yeah.
So scary at the moment.
It was scary and beautiful. Yeah, scary in the moment, certainly.
So what is the greatest truth that Swami has taught you?
I think the greatest truth is his core teaching, which is that we are all divine. We're all divine. So, he always used to say, you are God, and I'm also God. So that kind of, grow beyond duality. Don't take physical reality as the only reality. There's so much more. And you are God. That's a very empowering teaching, I find.
You are an editor of the Ishwarama Trust Journal, Mother Satya Sai. Can you share some experience with us about that trust?
About the trust? Well, it was my little cooker for, Swami puts us wherever we need to be. I was a professor, and so I thought Swami would send me to teach in one of his campuses. And instead, he sent me into the Women's Trust. And I wondered about that. I puzzled over that. But one of my understandings over the years is that I had wanted to be around Swami. That's why I came to India. And if I had been at the women's campus, I would have been an hour away, and I would only have seen him once a week or once a month. But what he let me know, he used to talk to me in darshan quite a bit. So I had only a few interviews in my early years as a devotee, but in darshan he would interact with me. And he let me know that you already learned how to teach, so learn something else. And so he put me into the Women's Trust. And one of the very interesting things that happened to me there, I used to say to Swami, I really don't know much about Indian culture. And even though I had lived in Delhi for over a year, I wasn't exposed that much to Indian culture. We were in a community of fellow students who were all foreigners. It was an unusual time. It was during Indira Gandhi's emergency rule. And so there were very few foreigners, there were very few poor people in the capital. They were moved out of the capital. And we were invited to all these fancy diplomatic parties and rich people parties, even though we were just students. But it was fun for people to have foreigners around. And so I really didn't get exposed that much to Indian culture. So I used to say to Swami, I don't know much. Well, in the Women's Trust, there were 15 of us working, the staff, and 14 were Indian. So it was me and 14 Indians. And so I learned so much over the years about Indian culture, about all different aspects of Indian culture. And the ladies who worked with me, it was all ladies and one man, one who ran the water project inside the ashram. And they would just answer, they were so patient with me, and they would answer my questions about everything, from household and cooking and marriage to...
And they spoke English too?
They all spoke English, yes.
Good.
They all spoke English. I wanted to learn better Telugu, but they all spoke English. And they would answer just any question. One I remember asking that had always puzzled me was about the red dot, the bindi that Indian women wear, and I wanted to know, why do Indian women wear that? And so my fellow workers gave me their explanations for that, all of which were quite sacred. But what was more interesting to me was we were working with the village women, and so I actually asked the village women one day down in the shed where I worked, where we were training them, why do you wear this? And they came up with such insightful answers. And the one I remember the best was, well, you see, the red dot represents the mother, the Mahashakti, the feminine aspect of God. And our black eyebrows represent Shiva, the masculine aspect of God. So when we put the dot there, we're joining male and female, mother, father, God.
Wow,
Isn't that
that's
beautiful?
amazing.
Yeah.
I thought the red dot was the spiritual eye.
I guess there are a lot of explanations.
You have appeared as featured speaker in a number of centers in USA. What inspired you to do that?
Well, I would just say whatever opportunities Swami gives to, in some loose sense, do his work or help in any way, I usually say yes. It's hard to say no when people ask for help, when Sai devotees ask for something. So when people ask, I usually do it.
If you had to sum up Swami's message in a few words, what it would be?
I think Swami's message is, not only are you divine, but all are divine. So that we should love God, and we should love everyone and help everyone to become divine. So, as he says, love all, but also be all.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Sue.
No, my pleasure.